The morning light filtered through the kitchen window as Sarah Thompson spread her business plan across the dining table, her hands trembling with nervous excitement. She had spent months preparing this moment, gathering the courage to share her dream with the one person whose opinion mattered most. Hey everyone, it's me, Tina, and I am so grateful you're here with me today. You know what? We're not just a channel, we're a family. Every story I share comes straight from my heart because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear it. Today's story touched my soul in ways I can't fully express. We're about to meet Sarah, a woman who was told by the person who should have lifted her up that she needed to stop dreaming big. Can you even imagine? But here's what I love. Sarah didn't let those words destroy her. She did something so quietly powerful that when the truth finally came out, it changed everything. This is about finding your voice when someone tries to silence it, about believing in yourself when no one else will. Stay until the very end, because trust me, you won't believe where this goes. If you're enjoying this, hit that like button and subscribe. We're building something beautiful here, and I'd be honored to have you as part of it. Now, let's dive into Sarah's incredible journey. Sarah had practiced her presentation dozens of times, calculating potential profits, researching suppliers, even creating sample gift baskets in their garage. Her husband, Michael, sat across from her, scrolling through his phone with barely concealed disinterest as she explained her vision for a custom gift basket business. "So what do you think?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with hope. Michael finally looked up, his expression mixing amusement with condescension. "Honey, I love you, but this is just another one of your little hobbies. Remember the jewelry phase? The candle business that lasted 3 months? You need to stop dreaming big and focus on reality. We have bills to pay, and I'm the one carrying this family. Maybe you should get a real job instead of wasting time on these fantasies." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. She had expected questions, maybe concerns, but not this complete dismissal. Her husband, who had promised to support her dreams, had just reduced years of planning to nothing more than childish fantasy. Her cheeks burned with humiliation as she gathered the papers. "You're probably right," she whispered. "I'll think about getting a job at the grocery store." But even as the words left her mouth, something shifted inside her chest. A small flame of defiance flickered to life. She thought about her grandmother, who had built a successful catering business from nothing, and her mother, who had become a nurse at 40. Strong women ran in her veins. That night, lying awake beside her snoring husband, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. If he wouldn't believe in her, she would believe in herself. If he wouldn't support her dreams, she would make them happen anyway. But this time, she would do it in complete silence. No more seeking approval. No more allowing someone else's doubts to become her limitations. She would build her empire in the shadows. The next morning, Sarah woke with clarity she hadn't felt in years. While Michael complained about his job, she mentally calculated how to scrape together startup money. She had a small savings account from her library job, money set aside for emergencies. This felt like an emergency of the soul, a now or never moment demanding action. She took that grocery store job Michael had suggested, but not for his reasons. Every shift became an opportunity to study consumer behavior, inventory management, and customer service. She watched how managers handled complaints, how cashiers created connections with customers. Her co-workers saw a quiet woman bagging groceries, but Sarah was building a business education no college could provide. In the evenings, after preparing dinner and listening to Michael's complaints, Sarah would claim headaches or early bedtime. Instead, she'd slip into the garage with her laptop, surrounded by ribbons and baskets and dreams that refused to die. She reached out to local artisans, negotiated wholesale prices, created a website using a free platform. Every purchase was carefully hidden in her personal account that Michael never asked about. The first order arrived on a rainy Tuesday. Sarah was shelving books when her phone buzzed. Someone wanted a birthday basket for their mother. $75, delivery by weekend. Her hands shook as she accepted. That night, she worked until 3 a.m, crafting the most beautiful basket she'd ever created. The review came the next week, 5 stars with glowing testimonials about care and quality. Sarah read it repeatedly like a prayer. She had been right. Her husband had been wrong. and she was just getting started. 3 months into her secret venture, Sarah had completed 47 orders, each building her confidence and bank account equally. Her business, Moments by Grace, named after her grandmother, was gaining traction through word of mouth and targeted social media advertising that cost less than their cable bill. Every notification sent adrenaline through her veins, a feeling of validation missing from her life for too long. The deception became routine. When Michael asked why she seemed happier, Sarah blamed her new job and exercise. When he noticed late nights, she mentioned a book series. The lies tasted bitter, but they protected the fragile empire she was building. He had dismissed her dreams, so why should he have access now that they were coming true? Sarah's strategy evolved as her business grew. She opened a post office box, created a separate email, and rented a small storage unit for inventory. The storage unit became her sanctuary, 100 square feet where she could be authentic without judgment. She would sit among ribbons and boxes during lunch, planning her next moves with almost spiritual clarity. The turning point came when a corporate client contacted her through the website. A local tech company wanted gift baskets for 150 employees for the holidays, a contract worth over $15,000. Sarah stared at the email for 10 minutes, her mind racing through logistics and possibilities. This wasn't just another order. This was validation on a scale she'd barely dared imagine. That evening at dinner, Michael complained about his job, griping about incompetent coworkers and his demanding boss who never recognized his contributions. Sarah listened with half an ear while calculating how to fulfill the corporate order without suspicion. She'd need vacation time, work around the clock, maybe hire help. The irony wasn't lost on her. While her husband complained about not being appreciated at work, she was building something significant he knew nothing about. "Are you even listening to me?" Michael snapped. "I've been talking for 5 minutes and you're staring at your plate." "I'm sorry," Sarah said automatically. "I was thinking about dinner tomorrow." "What were you saying?" Michael launched back into his monologue, and Sarah nodded appropriately while her mind worked through business challenges. She had become expert at this dual existence, her outer self playing supportive wife while her inner self built something that would eventually explode their world. Sarah accepted the corporate contract and threw herself into work with obsessive intensity. She took vacation from both jobs, telling Michael she was visiting her sister in Colorado. He barely looked up, calling out a distracted goodbye. The ease with which he let her go confirmed what she'd suspected. Their marriage had become routine rather than romance, obligation rather than partnership. Instead of Colorado, Sarah spent the week in her storage unit, which she'd upgraded to larger space with electricity. She hired 2 college students who needed money and didn't ask questions, supervised every detail with master craftsman precision. The work was exhausting, but her spirit soared. This was what it felt like to build something real, to see your vision take physical form. Delivery day arrived perfectly. Sarah coordinated with the corporate client for Friday afternoon delivery. The photos they sent later made her weep with pride. Employees holding baskets, reading personalized cards, admiring thoughtful contents. The CEO sent a personal email thanking her for exceeding expectations and requesting a meeting about making Moments by Grace their official corporate gift provider. When Sarah returned home, Michael barely acknowledged her presence. He was watching television, empty beer bottles on the coffee table. "How is your sister?" he asked, without interest. "She's good," Sarah replied smoothly. "We had a great time. I think I needed that break." Great, Michael mumbled, attention already back on television. "Did you bring that coffee?" Sarah handed him the airport-purchased bag while her phone buzzed with another order notification. She excused herself to unpack, climbing stairs to their bedroom while mentally calculating profits and planning expansion. "You know what I love about this community? Every person watching understands what it feels like to have a dream that matters, whether anyone else believes in it or not." Sarah's story is still unfolding, and what happens next will leave you speechless. But before we continue, I want to ask something from my heart to yours. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt dismissed or told your dreams were too big, would you do something special? Hit that subscribe button because we're creating something beautiful here. This isn't just about videos. It's about finding hope in real stories about real people who refuse to give up. And in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Have you pursued a dream in silence? Proven someone wrong who doubted you? Your stories matter to me and this community. You never know who might read your words and find courage to keep going. We're all in this together, supporting and lifting each other. Now let's see what Sarah does next, because things are about to get very interesting. 6 months into her secret business, Sarah had transformed from timid approval seeker to savvy entrepreneur. Her revenue had crossed 6 figures, a fact she could hardly believe when reviewing carefully hidden financial statements. Every penny was tracked in encrypted spreadsheets, money accumulating in a business account at a different bank, growing steadily as she reinvested profits while squirreling away for the future. Maintaining her double life had become complex but routine. Sarah rented proper workshop space in a small commercial building across town, telling the landlord she needed it for crafting hobbies and paying cash quarterly so no checks appeared in their banking records. The space was modest but functional, with good lighting, storage, and most importantly, complete privacy. She'd installed security and spent official work hours managing her real business through her phone, responding during bathroom breaks and lunch periods. Her employees had grown from 2 college students to 5 part-time workers assembling baskets according to her designs and quality standards. Sarah discovered a leadership talent she never knew she possessed, creating an environment built on respect, fair wages, and genuine appreciation. Unlike Michael, who constantly complained about co-workers' inadequacies, Sarah recognized her business thrived because she hired good people and treated them well. The strain of deception showed in subtle ways. Sarah found herself emotionally detached from Michael's daily dramas, nodding along while mentally reviewing inventory or planning new product lines. Their conversations became superficial exchanges, devoid of real intimacy, though Michael seemed not to notice the growing distance. He was content with the status quo, a wife managing household and working small jobs who didn't challenge his ego. "I got passed over for that promotion again," Michael announced one evening, slamming his briefcase down. 5 years at this company, and they give it to some kid fresh out of college. It's all politics, Sarah. Nothing to do with competence or hard work. Sarah made sympathetic noises while stirring pasta sauce, her mind elsewhere. She'd received an inquiry from a national gift retailer interested in carrying her products, an opportunity that could multiply revenue by 10. The meeting was scheduled for next week, during time Michael thought she'd be at the library. The contrast between his stagnation and her explosive growth felt like living in 2 different universes that occasionally intersected at dinner. "Are you listening?" Michael asked, irritation creeping in. This was becoming a pattern, his growing frustration with her perceived inattention. "Of course," Sarah replied, forcing focus. "I'm sorry you got passed over. That must be really disappointing." Michael continued his detailed analysis of everything wrong with his company's management. Sarah plated pasta and sat across from him, maintaining eye contact while calculating profit margins and expansion timelines. She had become an actress in her own life, playing engaged wife while her true self thrived in secret, building an empire he couldn't imagine. The following week, Sarah met with Patricia Chen from National Gift Gallery, a buyer who'd built her career identifying emerging brands with authentic stories. Patricia was impressed by product quality and personal touches. "Your work stands out because someone who cares is behind every detail," Patricia said, examining a sample basket. "In a market flooded with mass-produced garbage, authentic craftsmanship is becoming rare and valuable." They discussed business terms, and Sarah negotiated with surprising confidence. She'd learned through experience what her products were worth, what margins maintained quality, what compromises she absolutely wouldn't make. Patricia respected her firm boundaries, and they reached an agreement placing Moments by Grace products in 75 Midwest stores by quarter's end. Walking to her car, Sarah felt tears streaming down her face, releasing emotion that had been building for months. She'd done it. She'd taken a mocked and belittled dream and turned it into something real and valuable and growing. The woman who'd nervously presented her business plan a year ago felt like a different person. That woman had sought permission and approval. This new Sarah created opportunities and made decisions. The transformation was deeper than financial success. It was reclaiming self-worth slowly eroded over years of a diminishing marriage. That evening, Michael came home in a foul mood after another boss argument. Sarah listened with detachment that would have worried her a year ago, but now felt like protection. She'd learned his unhappiness was something he chose to carry, not something she could fix or was responsible for managing. While he ranted about corporate unfairness, Sarah mentally reviewed the National Gift Gallery contract, calculating how expansion would require more space, employees, everything. The business she'd built in silence was outgrowing its hidden corners, and she knew soon she'd have to make difficult decisions about the future. "You know what your problem is?" her friend Jennifer had said over coffee last week. "You've gotten so good at hiding your success that you're believing your own cover story. You're not a grocery clerk and part-time librarian. You're a business owner with serious revenue and national distribution. At some point, you'll have to own that truth publicly, including with Michael." Jennifer's words had haunted Sarah for days. She was right. The business had grown beyond hobby status, beyond something indefinitely hidden. Real success demanded acknowledgement, required stepping into light instead of operating in shadows. But revealing everything to Michael filled her with complex dread and anticipation. Part of her wanted to see his face when he realized how wrong he'd been. Another part worried about the destruction this revelation might bring to their already fragile marriage. The one-year anniversary of Sarah's business coincided with her 13th wedding anniversary, a symmetry feeling both poetic and painful. Michael had made dinner reservations, his idea of acknowledging the milestone without actual effort or thought. Sarah dressed carefully, choosing a new outfit purchased with business earnings, though Michael would assume it came from a clearance rack. Applying makeup, she studied her reflection and barely recognized the woman staring back. There was strength in her eyes that hadn't been there a year ago, confidence from knowing she'd built something significant despite every obstacle. Dinner started pleasantly, Michael in rare good mood after finally receiving a small raise. He talked animatedly about plans to invest in a new gaming system, oblivious that his wife's secret business had generated more revenue last quarter than he'd earned all year. Sarah smiled and nodded, sipping wine and marveling at how completely disconnected they'd become. She wondered if he'd even notice if she disappeared tomorrow, or if he'd simply be inconvenienced by figuring out groceries and laundry. "I've been thinking," Michael said, taking her hand in a gesture feeling more performative than genuine. "We should start planning for the future more seriously. Maybe buy a bigger house, really establish ourselves financially. You've been working hard, and with my raise we should qualify for a decent mortgage." The irony made Sarah want to laugh or cry, or both. Here was her husband planning their financial future based on income that was a fraction of what she secretly earned, completely unaware she could probably pay cash for a house. The disconnect between his perception and reality had grown so vast, she wondered how much longer she could maintain the charade without losing herself. "That sounds nice," Sarah replied neutrally. "We can look into it." "I know I can be hard on you sometimes," Michael continued, apparently taking her agreement as encouragement. "But it's only because I want what's best for us. Someone has to be the realist in this relationship. Keep our expectations grounded so we don't end up disappointed when things don't work out." His words, meant to sound caring, landed like daggers. Even on their anniversary, he couldn't resist reminding her of her place, his role as the practical one protecting her from unrealistic dreams. She thought about contracts in her locked filing cabinet, employee payroll she managed weekly, profit statements showing consistent monthly growth. She thought about Patricia calling her a rising industry star, customer reviews praising creativity and quality, business awards she'd been nominated for. "You're absolutely right," Sarah said, taking a long wine sip to hide the bitterness in her smile. "Thank you for keeping me grounded." The rest of dinner passed in superficial conversation blur. Michael talked about coworkers, fantasy football, his opinions on everything he considered important. Sarah made appropriate responses while her mind wandered to her workshop, where her team was fulfilling a large celebrity client order discovered through Instagram. The disconnect between her two lives had never felt more pronounced, and she knew with sudden clarity this situation couldn't continue indefinitely. Something would have to give, and soon. The breaking point came 2 weeks later, unexpectedly. Sarah's business had been featured in a regional business magazine article about successful women entrepreneurs building companies from scratch. The journalist found her through National Gift Gallery and was so impressed she wanted a full profile piece. Sarah agreed, thinking Michael never read business magazines and would never stumble across the article buried in local business sections of a publication he considered boring. She was wrong. One of Michael's co-workers, whose wife was into crafting and small business trends, saw the article and recognized Sarah's photo. He mentioned it casually to Michael during coffee break, congratulating him on his wife's success and asking why he'd never mentioned Sarah was running such an impressive operation. Michael had apparently laughed it off as mistaken identity, insisting his wife worked at a grocery store and library, not running some fancy gift basket company worth hundreds of thousands. That evening, Michael came home early, his face red with anger or embarrassment or both. He held a printed magazine copy, pages crumpled from his tight grip. Sarah was preparing dinner when he walked in, and his expression told her that her secret life was about to collide catastrophically with her public one. Her heart pounded, but surprisingly, she felt no fear. Instead, there was odd relief, like a weight carried too long was finally being lifted. "What the hell is this?" Michael demanded, throwing the magazine on the counter so hard pages scattered. "Jimmy showed this to me at work. Said congratulations on my wife being some big-shot entrepreneur. I told him he was crazy, that my wife works at the grocery store bagging groceries. Imagine how I looked when he showed me your picture, Sarah. Your picture in a business magazine, talking about your thriving gift basket empire and innovative approach to personalized corporate gifting." Sarah turned from the stove, meeting his eyes with surprising calmness. A year ago, this confrontation would have terrified her, sent her scrambling to apologize. But the woman she'd become through building her business didn't apologize for success or shrink from conflict. She'd earned every dollar, every contract, every moment of pride. She'd done it without his support or belief, and she refused to diminish that achievement now. "It's all true," she said simply, turning off the burner and facing him fully. "Every word is accurate. I started the business the day after you told me to stop dreaming big. For the past year, while you've complained about your job and everything else wrong with your life, I've been building something real, something successful, something now generating more revenue than you've ever made in your entire career." The words hung between them, truth finally spoken after months of careful deception. Sarah walked past Michael to the dining table, her movements deliberate and calm despite adrenaline coursing through her veins. She retrieved her laptop and opened it, navigating to business files with practiced ease. For a year, she'd hidden these numbers, these achievements, these proofs of her capabilities. Now she was ready to lay everything bare, force him to confront reality of who she actually was, versus who he'd convinced himself she should be. "Come here," she said, her voice steady and authoritative in a way that made Michael automatically comply, his anger momentarily overshadowed by surprise at her tone. "Since you want to know everything, I'll show you everything. This is Moments by Grace, the company I built from nothing while you told me I was wasting time on fantasies." She pulled up financial dashboards, graphs and numbers, telling a story of consistent growth and impressive profitability. Michael leaned over her shoulder, breathing heavily as he scanned figures contradicting everything he thought he knew. Current revenue, $473,000. Net profit margin, 38%. Corporate clients, 23. Retail partnerships, 75 stores across 6 states. Employees, 8 part-time workers plus 2 full-time managers hired last month. "This can't be real," Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. The evidence was right there, impossible to deny or dismiss. Where did you get startup capital? Where have you been doing this? How did I not know?" Sarah closed the laptop and turned to face him, years of suppressed frustration finally finding voice. "You didn't know, because you didn't want to know. You were so comfortable with your version of reality, where you're the successful breadwinner and I'm the grateful little wife who doesn't challenge your ego, that you never bothered to actually see me. I started this business with $300 from my personal savings, the one you've never asked about because you assumed it was just my little fund for makeup and shoes." She stood and walked to the window, needing space from confusion and anger radiating off him. Outside, their neighbor watered his lawn, everything normal while her world cracked open. "I worked every spare minute, early mornings before you woke up, Late nights after you slept, weekends when you played golf or watched sports. I rented a workshop across town, opened a separate bank account, created a whole business infrastructure you never noticed because you never looked. And yes, I lied. I lied when I said I was visiting my sister. I lied about going to bed early with headaches. I lied about where I was and what I was doing because you'd already made it clear my dreams didn't matter. Michael sank into a chair, his face pale and hands trembling. This clearly wasn't how he'd expected this confrontation to go. He probably imagined her apologizing, making excuses, begging for understanding and forgiveness. Instead, he faced a woman who'd built something remarkable without him, despite him, in defiance of his doubt. "I was trying to protect you from disappointment," he said weakly. "Most small businesses fail. The statistics are terrible. I didn't want to see you invest everything into something that would probably collapse and leave you heartbroken." "No," Sarah said firmly, her voice cutting through his justification like a knife. "You weren't protecting me. You were protecting yourself, protecting your ego from the possibility I might be more capable than you gave me credit for. Protecting your role as primary earner and decision-maker. Protecting your comfortable worldview where I stayed small and manageable and dependent. Well, guess what? I'm not small anymore. I'm not manageable. And I haven't been dependent on you for months." The truth settled over both of them, like snow, cold and undeniable. Their marriage had been built on certain assumptions, certain power dynamics Sarah had just completely upended. She could see him struggling to process this new reality, to reconcile the wife he thought he had with the successful entrepreneur standing before him. Part of her felt sympathy for his confusion, but a larger part felt vindicated, powerful, finally seen in her fullness instead of the diminished version he preferred. "So what now?" Michael asked, his voice small and lost. "Are you leaving me? Is that what this is about? Building up your business so you can afford to divorce me?" Sarah hadn't consciously planned for this moment, but she realized somewhere deep inside she'd been building exactly that, the means and ability to stand on her own 2 feet, financially independent and emotionally separate. "I don't know," she said honestly. "A year ago, when you told me to stop dreaming big, something inside me broke. Or maybe it woke up. I realized I'd been waiting for your permission to be myself, your approval to pursue dreams, your validation to feel worthy. And when you refused to give it, I had to make a choice. I could let your doubt become my reality, or I could prove you wrong. I chose to prove you wrong." She walked back to the table and stood across from him, hands gripping the chair back for support. "What happens next depends on you, Michael. Can you be married to a woman who's successful in her own right, who makes her own decisions, and doesn't need your permission? Can you celebrate my achievements instead of feeling threatened? Can you be my partner instead of my superior? Because I'm not going back to being small. I'm not going back to hiding who I am. This business is mine. This success is mine, and I earned every bit without you. The question is whether there's room in your life for the real me, or if you'd prefer the fantasy version who needed you to feel complete." The silence stretched between them, heavy with decisions that would reshape their future. "My dear friends, can we just take a moment here? This story is hitting me right in my heart. When I was preparing Sarah's journey, I kept thinking about how many of us have been in that position where we had to choose between making someone else comfortable and pursuing our own truth. It's one of the hardest decisions anyone can face. If you're still with me, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being part of this community, where we don't just watch stories, we feel them together. If this is touching you, please subscribe and hit that bell notification. You all mean so much to me. And here's what I really want to know. Have you ever had to hide your dreams from someone who should have been supporting them? Or maybe you're in that situation right now. Please share your story in the comments. This community is built on our shared experiences, struggles, and victories. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today to find courage to keep going. We're not just telling Sarah's story, we're creating a space where all our stories matter. We're getting close to the end, and I promise, what happens next will stay with you. Let's see how Sarah's story concludes. The weeks following the revelation were awkward and tense in ways that made Sarah question whether her marriage could survive the truth. Michael moved into the guest bedroom, claiming he needed space to think. though Sarah suspected it had more to do with bruised ego than deep contemplation. They moved around each other like strangers sharing a house, polite and distant, their conversations limited to necessary logistics about bills and schedules. The emotional intimacy that had already been dying was now officially dead, replaced by careful choreography of avoidance. Sarah threw herself into her business with renewed vigor, no longer needing to hide passion or downplay achievements. She moved operations to a larger facility, hired additional staff, and finally put full energy into growing what she'd built. Without the weight of secrecy, her creativity flourished in new directions. She launched a subscription service for monthly themed baskets, expanded into corporate event planning, and started a blog about entrepreneurship and following dreams despite opposition. The blog's authenticity resonated with readers, many sharing their own stories of building businesses in secret or pursuing dreams against family wishes. Messages poured in from women across the country who'd been told their dreams were too big, their ambitions unrealistic, their hopes mere fantasies. Some were still hiding ventures from disapproving spouses or family members. Others had given up entirely, convinced that people who loved them must be right about their limitations. Sarah answered every message personally, sharing what she'd learned about believing in yourself when no one else would, about quiet persistence power, about building meaningful things despite opposition or indifference. "You've become some kind of guru," her friend Jennifer said over lunch one day, scrolling through Sarah's blog comments with wide eyes. "Look at this woman thanking you for inspiring her to start her photography business despite her husband's objections. And this one who says your story gave her courage to apply for a business loan. Sarah, you're not just running a successful company. You're changing lives." The observation made Sarah pause and reflect on how far she'd come from that kitchen morning when Michael's dismissive words almost destroyed her dreams. She'd built something much bigger than gift baskets and profit margins. She'd created a movement, however small, of people refusing to shrink themselves for others' comfort. The responsibility felt enormous and empowering equally. At home, Michael had become increasingly withdrawn, and Sarah noticed him reading her business magazine article multiple times, studying photos and quotes as if trying to find the woman he married in the successful entrepreneur featured on glossy pages. One evening, she found him at the dining table with her laptop open to her business dashboard, though he quickly closed it when she entered. "I wasn't snooping," he said defensively. "Well, maybe I was. I just wanted to understand what I missed. How I could have been so blind to what you were doing." Sarah poured water and sat across from him, a distance feeling both physical and metaphorical. "You weren't blind, Michael. You just weren't looking. There's a difference. You were so focused on your own life, your own disappointments and frustrations, that you didn't have energy or attention left for mine. And I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm saying it because it's the truth we both need to acknowledge if we're going to move forward in any direction." Michael nodded slowly, his fingers drumming nervously on the table in a habit she'd seen 1,000 times. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about whether I can be married to someone successful in her own right, and the answer is more complicated than I want it to be. Part of me is proud of you, genuinely impressed by what you've accomplished, but another part feels diminished somehow, like your success somehow makes me less than what I was. That's ego talking," Sarah said gently but firmly. "My success doesn't subtract from you unless you let it. In a healthy relationship, we should celebrate each other's victories, not treat them like competitions where someone has to lose for someone else to win. The fact I built a successful business doesn't make you less intelligent or capable. But the fact you can't celebrate it with me, that you feel threatened instead of proud, tells me everything I need to know about where we actually stand." The conversation was interrupted by Sarah's phone ringing with a call from Patricia at National Gift Gallery. The buyer was calling with news that their products were selling so well they wanted to expand distribution to their entire national network, 300 stores across the country. It was the kind of opportunity entrepreneurs dream about, validation that her products weren't just good, but exceptional, desired by customers from coast to coast. Sarah took the call in her home office, negotiating terms while her heart raced with excitement and pride. When she emerged 30 minutes later, Michael was still at the dining table, now with a beer and a look she couldn't quite read. That was National Gift Gallery, she said, unable to completely contain excitement despite tension between them. They want to carry our products in all their stores nationwide. It's a massive expansion, probably the biggest opportunity we've had. Congratulations, Michael said, and to his credit, he sounded like he meant it, though there was sadness underlying the words. You've really done something incredible, Sarah. I can't pretend to understand all the business stuff, but even I can see this is a big deal. They looked at each other across their kitchen space. Two people who'd promised to spend lives together, now feeling like strangers navigating uncertain territory. Sarah realized she was waiting for him to say something more, to ask questions about expansion, to show genuine interest in this thing that consumed her passion and energy. But he just sat there, drinking his beer and looking lost, and she understood with painful clarity that he didn't know how to be with this version of her. The next morning, Sarah made a decision that had been forming for weeks, but that she'd been afraid to acknowledge. She sat down with Michael before he left for work, her hands folded calmly despite her pounding heart. I think we need to talk about the future honestly, she began, voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to say. This marriage isn't working, Michael. It hasn't been working for a long time. We've been going through motions, playing roles, but there's no real partnership here anymore. Michael's face went pale, but he didn't interrupt, allowing her to continue. I'm not saying this to hurt you or punish you for not supporting my business. I'm saying it because I've spent the last year discovering who I really am, what I'm really capable of, and I've realized I can't go back to being less than that. I need a partner who celebrates my success instead of feeling threatened by it, who encourages my dreams instead of dismissing them. And I don't think you can be that person for me. At least not right now. The conversation about divorce was surprisingly calm, as if both had been waiting for someone to finally say out loud what they'd both been thinking for months. Michael didn't fight her decision or try to change her mind with promises of doing better. Instead, there was strange relief in finally acknowledging their marriage had become a hollow shell, maintained by habit rather than love. They agreed to handle the separation amicably, work with a mediator rather than lawyers, try to preserve dignity and respect even while dismantling the life they'd built together. Sarah moved into a small apartment above her expanded workshop, a space that felt more like home in its first week than her marital house had felt in years. She could walk downstairs in the morning and be immediately immersed in work, surrounded by evidence of what she'd accomplished through determination and self-belief. Her team had grown to 15 employees, each carefully selected not just for skills, but for alignment with the company's values of quality, authenticity, and personal connection. The divorce proceedings took 3 months to finalize, during which Sarah focused on business expansion and emotional work of understanding why her marriage failed. Therapy helped her see patterns she'd missed, ways she'd made herself smaller to accommodate Michael's need to feel superior, moments when she'd prioritized his comfort over her own dreams. The realization was painful but necessary, a reckoning that left her stronger and more self-aware. On the day their divorce was finalized, Sarah didn't feel sad or angry or regretful. Instead, she felt free, like she'd been carrying a weight she didn't know she could put down. She drove to her workshop and found her team fulfilling the first national order for National Gift Gallery, 300 stores receiving initial inventory of carefully crafted gift baskets. The sight of her employees working together, laughing and talking as they assembled products that would bring joy to customers across the country, filled her with purpose and pride that no marriage certificate could have provided. Michael called a few weeks after the divorce was final, his voice hesitant and unsure. I wanted you to know that I saw your interview on that morning show last week, he said without preamble. You looked confident and happy, more like yourself than I've seen you in years. And I wanted to say, I'm sorry, Sarah. Sorry for dismissing your dreams, for making you feel like you had to hide who you really were, for being too caught up in my own issues to see what you were building. You deserved better from me, and I failed you. The apology was unexpected, and Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes at genuine remorse in his voice. Thank you for saying that, she replied softly. I think we both failed each other in different ways. We got stuck in patterns that didn't serve either of us. But I want you to know I don't regret our time together, even though it ended. You were part of my journey. even if it wasn't in the way either of us expected. 6 months later, Moments by Grace hit the $1 million revenue mark, a milestone feeling both monumental and strangely ordinary. Sarah celebrated with her team, with champagne and speeches and gratitude for everyone who'd contributed to building something special. She thought about that kitchen morning 18 months ago, the moment when Michael's words could have destroyed her dreams, but instead sparked determination that changed her life completely. She'd built an empire in silence, proved wrong everyone who doubted her, and most importantly, discovered her own strength and capability. The business continued growing, expanding into new product lines and markets, but Sarah made sure never to lose sight of what made it special: personal touch, attention to quality, genuine care in every basket. She became a sought-after speaker at business conferences and women's entrepreneurship events, sharing her story of building success despite opposition and dismissal. Her message resonated because it was authentic, born from real struggle and real triumph rather than theoretical business principles. Sarah stood in her workshop looking at the empire she'd built from nothing, and she felt profound gratitude for the journey that brought her here. Michael's dismissive words that could have crushed her spirit had instead become the catalyst for her greatest transformation. She'd learned that sometimes the people who doubt us are actually giving us the greatest gift, the opportunity to prove them wrong, and more importantly, to prove to ourselves what we're truly capable of achieving. The story wasn't really about building a $1 million business or proving her ex-husband wrong. It was about a woman who'd been told to stop dreaming big and had instead learned to dream bigger than she ever thought possible. It was about finding her voice when someone tried to silence it, about believing in herself when no one else would, about building something meaningful, not because it was easy, but because it mattered. And in the end, that was the real victory. Not the money or success or validation, but the reclamation of her own power and the unshakable knowledge that she was enough, all by herself, without needing anyone's permission to be extraordinary.